bit early, but more so of getting everything ready. I think I'm a little too early, but the way my technology has been, me playing with it.
I understand. Yeah, we're still like 8 minutes early, but that's fine.
Uh, okay, let's see. So, let me go to. Okay, so we are live on YouTube. And then if it works better, we can put the YouTube link like on Facebook and I can send that.
Okay.
I'm gonna send it to you through Facebook Messenger though. And then let me just check my business page real quick. And there's gonna be a slight delay with everything just because of the stream. From what
Okay.
we're saying in here and what people might hear on there. And then, okay, you should have that. So we're good on. So we're good on that. Okay, you'll see us. So we're good. Welcome, world on YouTube. Let me go to Facebook and check it out. Let's see. Now that is so strange though. Why did he give me a brand new link for everything? If I didn't change the meeting, delete anything or anything. Okay, and we are live on Facebook as well. So we are going to get started in about 7 minutes. So tell everybody to gather around, come on aboard and everything like that so we can get down to business. In the meantime, we're going to put a little countdown music on for you guys. And then once the time comes at 7 o'clock on the dot, we'll be ready to discuss estate planning. All right, 5 on Facebook. I'm going to share this to my personal page. Put it in the chat if you can hear me though, to make sure we got sound. Somebody can check me to make sure we got sound on Facebook and YouTube. That'll be great. Okay, let's see. Miss Anisha, can you do me a favor? Oh, I was gonna say, let me text.
I'm sorry, yes, ma'am. Cynthia's still trying to get in.
Okay, tell her to use the passcode.
That's what I'm telling her. She's trying to figure out how to, I think, go back.
Oh, okay. Hey guys, if you guys are watching out there and you want to share the information, bypass that link, but use the passcode that you see on the flyer that has the correct information to get you into the Zoom if you choose to come on Zoom, or you can stay virtual through YouTube and Facebook and kind of just go from there. So if you can't get in and you're trying to get in or you're waiting and nobody's letting you in, go ahead, use the passcode and use the access code on the flyer. Don't click the link and come in through that way, okay? We will be getting started in 4 minutes. So go around, tell all your family, get around as a family to learn about estate planning. That way you know what to do in the future.
Okay, and I'm on Facebook and YouTube. Okay. Awesome.
Oh,
okay.
Okay,
Right.
Cynthia, can you hear us on Facebook and YouTube? I just want to double check the sound. Somebody leave it in the comments if you can hear me okay, just so I know that we're doing okay and you can't hear me? Yeah, I've been practicing all day. Somebody leave it in the comments if you can hear me okay.
I can hear you, Janelle.
Okay.
I can hear you on YouTube. Let me check Facebook.
So the LP is coming back. You think it's just one of the people that would like to be part of the meeting?
Probably, yeah. That's why
Okay.
I just assumed it was Lord. Okay. Like I said, I've been working on this all day to make sure it's right and tight. And bless God, hopefully it will stay right and tight. Like my chair's trying to figure out, does it want to be in the shot or out of the shot? So I guess I'll try to put it more in the shot. Alrighty. Okay, great. Okay. Let me see. I'm looking at a blank screen. Okay, 2 more minutes and we're gonna get started. So estate planning, go get everybody around your computer, on your phone, and let's get down to business. All right, let's see if I can spotlight you. Lauren, I'm gonna make you a co-host. And then I'm gonna pin me. Okay, so we should be able to see the 2 of us. I am hoping and praying. Okay, we are cooking with grease. I got you on picture to picture.
Okay.
All right, 1 minute and counting. Hurry up, run. Get to your computers. Get to your Zoom and log in. And I'm gonna be turning my body here in a second. All right, I hope you're excited as much as I am to learn about everything. I see you guys coming on the Zoom. If you want to join us in the Zoom, we're gonna do Q&A a little bit later. Go ahead, get ready, log on to Zoom. If you just want to stay on Facebook or YouTube, that's fine too. We still love to talk to you. So if you want to leave comments in the chat on Facebook, go ahead and do that. If you want to leave comments on YouTube on the chat, we got people monitoring that and that are going to let us know what you want to ask, or if you want us to let us know something important. Okay, but again, that's going to be at the end. So let's go ahead. Everybody, welcome to Let's Get Down to Business. Let's make some virtual noise, just virtual noise in the building.
Yay.
It is good to see everybody, and thank you for being at the right place at the right time, getting information to improve your life and make sound decisions. I am so excited. It's been probably about 3 or 4 months since I've done, maybe even 5 months since I've done the Let's Get Down to Business, but that's okay. It is good to start off the new year with information and what you can do to improve your life. Now, today I have the one and only Lauren and the Lauren
McAlpin.
McAlpin. I said Alpin. I was calling Alpin. McAlpin Law Firm on this call. Now, let me tell you guys how this all got started, actually. Lauren is in the best sorority on this side of heaven called Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
Absolutely.
And I found out when she moved here that she does estate planning. And I was like, oh my God, Lauren, I just told my parents they need to get their stuff in order. And I didn't know, for one, there was a Black lawyer out in Tucson that does estate planning. And I was like, man, I got to have you on my podcast so we can talk about this. And even through my real estate experience, and we'll get a little bit further down the line and we'll talk about that, some of the bad things that kind of happen between families falling apart over an estate for not having a will, not having a trust in place. So without further ado, I'm going to let Lauren introduce herself. That way you can get familiar with her and see why she is so awesome that we just have to have her on this podcast to give you guys all this information.
Thank you so much, Janelle. I'm so excited to be here and I love your podcast. And we've had some really fruitful conversations already. So I'm really excited and passionate that you are passionate about it as well. So I've been practicing law for 10 years. I started in entertainment law and I recently launched my own law firm focusing on entrepreneurs, business assets, business protection, and estate planning. So one thing I saw was that there was a gap for people, particularly people of color that look like us, understanding how to protect their assets. So, people would kind of start these side hustles during the pandemic, but either weren't setting it up properly, weren't getting the proper trademarks in place. And even if they did have a business in place, they didn't have the proper contracts or estate plan to make sure that that generational wealth that they're trying to build is actually continuing on to the next generation. So that's what I geared my law firm around. And I'm so excited to be here. I practice in Georgia and in Arizona, but I do trademarks all over the nation. So if anybody has any questions, I can definitely point them in the right direction, even if they're not my jurisdiction.
Perfect. So without further ado, we're going to jump into it. But before we jump into it, let me give you guys a couple of housekeeping things. If you're inside the Zoom chat right now, please just make sure you stay muted until it's time, or if you're called on or picked on to ask Lauren a question. Also, if you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube, go ahead, leave us comments in the chat, leave your questions in the chat. At the end of this session, and we get through some dialogue, we're going to have Q&A. That way you can ask Lauren a question. Now, on top of that, we want you to start with the phrase, "My question is." We love to hear stories and stuff like that, but sometimes stories can take 10 to 15 minutes, and we just don't have that much time. I know it's been a long day. We all came back from work and everything like that. So start with "My question is," and if Lauren needs more information, she will ask you more questions. If it takes a little bit longer to answer, Lauren is definitely going to be leaving her information so you can contact her directly to go over your situation and what you got going on. Okay, so let's get it good. So let's jump right into it. So Lauren, question number one, what is estate planning?
So, okay, that's a really big question, but it basically is a way to plan for the inevitable and unexpected. So most people hear about a will or a trust, which is definitely part of an estate plan. For most people, they at least have a will, right? If they have anything at all. Trusts usually come into play depending on the types of assets that you have and what type of protection that you need. And then along with the estate plan, particularly if you're an entrepreneur, we talk about healthcare power of attorneys, durable power of attorneys to help protect your assets in the event that you're incapacitated, and then living wills and or healthcare directives. So that's what we put together to make sure that the doctors or your loved ones know what you want in the event that you can't speak for yourself in the hospital. And that also kind of goes into place with the durable power of attorney to make sure that your business is taken care of and that your bills are continuously paid and that everything is taken care of in the event that you're incapacitated.
Right. So I was telling Lauren when we got started, so I'll give this disclaimer out there too. Once I figured out Lauren does estate planning and everything like that, and seeing some of my transaction between family that was going through the probate process and things of that nature, was like, hey, I need to make sure I get my stuff together because I'm a single person with no descendants and stuff. Like, what does that look like for me if life would ever happen and stuff like that? So that's when I started asking Lauren more questions and stuff like that. And I told Lauren before we got on the podcast and everything, I'm like a kindergarten when it comes to estate planning. So I'm just going to be throwing things out there of what's needed and what someone might need to do. So I'm going through this process right now with Lauren as we speak, paid my buddy and everything like that to get everything set up. So I'm not preaching something that I wouldn't practice myself. I'm actually doing it myself. And like I said, with all the information I learned, was like, got to get in here and share it. So with that being said, Lauren, who needs a will or a trust?
Yeah, so pretty much anybody that wants to have some type of control over what happens to their person or their assets. I mean, I know that there are people out there that really just don't care. They're like, hey, I'm dead. I don't have any loved ones. I really don't care if the government comes in and takes my money. But, you know, a lot of us, particularly those of us that want to build some type of generational wealth after we're long gone, it's just important that we have something in place. So if you actually care about what happens to your assets, you need some type of estate plan. Definitely if you have any type of blended family, if you are married, if you have children, if you have grandchildren. So if you have anybody other than yourself and you care about what's going to happen to your business or your assets, you have to have a plan. Because if not, if you die without a will or any type of plan, you're in a situation where the government mandates what's going to happen to your assets and to you.
So I don't want you guys to miss this part. So if you don't have a will and if you don't have a trust, Uncle Sam, AKA the government, gets to dictate how your assets are divided up in whatever goes on with that. Is that usually through a probate court, Lauren, or how does that transpire?
Correct. That's through a probate court. So what would happen, I know some of us have had to deal with a grandparent or parent's estate before, but if you haven't been through it before, you would have to go to the court and let them know. You would show them the death certificate. You would show them some type of petition for probating an estate without a will. And then it will go by what the statute has determined. So each state mandates what happens to your property if you die without a will. So in the state of Arizona, if you're not married and you have children, then generally it'll be split equally between your children. But going through the probate process, if you don't have a lot of assets, they're paying a lawyer, they're paying court fees, and that might eat up some of that property. So they might have to sell the house. They might have to do an estate sale, like we see in the old school newspapers when they have an estate sale. It's usually because they need money for the estate. So if you want to make sure that they're taken care of, that's where that paperwork comes into play.
So that is a very critical piece of it. And that's what kind of helped me formulate my decision to go ahead. Because some people would say, hey, you're in your 30s and stuff, you shouldn't be thinking about that. Or especially in our community, the thought of thinking about death is hard to believe, is a scary topic of like, no, don't talk about it. But here's the thing about it, just like taxes, death is inevitable. I mean, it's going to happen. It's not a question when. If it will happen, it's a question of when it's going to happen. So with that, in my decision making, it was like thinking, do I really want Uncle Sam to tell me or my siblings or descendants or whatever where all my hard-earned money that I spent my whole life accumulating is going to go and how that's going to happen? And on top of that, it's just one of those things of like, they have their hands in so much already. Like, at least my final say is I want my final say to be that of my voice of what's written down. So
so it should be empowering to you as well. Like that's also a form of empowerment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it was one of those things that we always hear, get life insurance and all this other stuff, but it's like, hey, but what about that life insurance? Do you have it in a will? Do you have it in a trust? Like there's parts and elements to it to where it was like, okay, we definitely need to have more of these conversations, because it's kind of like taxes to me. I don't know a lot of tax codes and different things out there. All I know is that we have to pay it. And the same thing with like when it comes to an estate and stuff. Well, there's some things we need to do, but there's not a lot of, I feel, valuable information out there to say, hey, make sure you have this. You got the life insurance. Now put it in a trust. Hey, now you got a rental property. Hey, now put it in a irrevocable trust or something like that. So what I do want to ask you, and if you want to piggyback on anything I said, Lauren, by all means, especially to clarify anything, please go ahead, cut me off and let me know. What I do want, I guess my question would be the consequences of not having a will or trust. I know we talked about the government getting involved in making that decision, but what are some other consequences that could potentially happen?
Well, a couple of things. So, we know famously Prince died without a will, which was crazy to me. And that was like a 6-year battle. And as private of a person as Prince was, he's now in a situation. I mean, he's the man that changed his name to a symbol, right? Because he didn't want the record company to have power over him and to make any more money off of his name. And then you're in a situation where he dies without a will. He has all these half siblings that we don't know, how often he communicates with them. And they inherit his entire estate and split it, I think, with one of the other companies. And now Paisley Park is open to the public, which is great for fans. Like, I know my mom's in here. I'm sure she loves it. But, for somebody like
I
Prince,
went too, Mom. I was just there for Thanksgiving. I feel
Right.
you. I got my cup and everything in the back. Might go get it, show y'all.
Exactly. But, the privacy aspect of that now somebody that was so private now has this whole world open to the world, and you weren't able to control those assets. You also have people like, I think Whitney Houston was another one that didn't necessarily update her trust on a regular basis, where you have a young girl that's inheriting millions of dollars. And as she's going through life, sometimes you have to kind of keep looking into that trust or those will documents to see if that person's even mature enough to handle that type of money at the age 18. And, unfortunately for Bobbi Kristina, I mean, she's 18 and gets millions of dollars and now gets to run around and do whatever with it. So not keeping those documents updated is also a horror story, because some people aren't mature enough to handle the circumstances. If you're in a blended family, if a child is not 18 years of age and they are inheriting your ex's property, I mean, technically that's going to your ex-spouse, ex-significant other as the guardian of that. So if they're not, wise enough to be able to look over those funds, it might not make it to your son or daughter or the person that you're really trying to take care of. So there's a lot that can go wrong. It really just depends on the circumstances.
Absolutely. So with that being said, let's dive into what is the difference between a will and a trust. And I know I kind of put my kindergarten teacher hat on and put it in this way when it comes to the will. I'm like, if it's a will, it will go to probate 100%, no questions asked. Where a lot of people, especially in our community, it's under this facade, if you have a will, you can skip probate for it. And I learned that through my real estate transaction. Oh no, honey, that is not the case.
Absolutely not. So yes, that is a great question. So a will is just a piece of paper that you write down what you want to happen to all of your assets, your house, your car, your jewelry, your furniture. You're able to give assets away in the way that you see fit. That is what's called probate, like something that is probate property, right? So we have probate and non-probate property. And when we talk about non-probate property, that property is passing through another form, whether it be your bank account, making sure there's a payable on death clause, your insurance policy. We all fill out those beneficiary forms. So that's not something that you handle in the will. Anything that you can pass along with the beneficiary, that's something completely separate. Anything that you can't title appropriately, your furniture, your house, your car, that will go through your will. Now, if you have a will and you die, then you will have to probate the will, meaning you go to court. The court notifies creditors that this person has passed away and asks them if anybody owes any money to them, etc. And then it will pass on to your heirs. Now, a trust, unlike what people believe that a trust is just for trust fund babies as we hear it, it's still, it's still a piece of paper, but it's a contract. So when you have, for instance, a revocable trust, you're putting together a contract between yourself and your future beneficiaries, but you are the initial beneficiary for that trust. So what you're doing is you're titling your house in the name of your trust, you're putting your house in this trust, and at the time of death, that trust document gives that trustee the ability to sign over those property or those assets to whomever are named as beneficiaries. Unlike a will, a trust document does not have to go through probate. So you get the privacy aspect of that. Generally, a lot of celebrities, they have trusts, so we never really find out, all the juicy things that were
Details
in
of everything.
We never find out because there's a trust document. It passes through a private trustee, somebody that you trust, which is in the name. And the only thing that actually passes through the probate court is done through what's called a pour over will. So the things that we can't really tally up and name them appropriately, we put in a pour over will. So it just passes through, some of the smaller things, the furniture, a couple of pieces of jewelry, that goes through probate. But the majority of your estate will go through the trust.
So I think that is so important to know the difference between the two. And like I said, there's so many people that say, go get a will, go get a will. Now I just scream from the mountaintop, go get a trust, go get a trust, trust me in this, what I'm saying. Is definitely good. So like if somebody wanted to set up a trust, what do they need to do to get started? Like, is that, I know there's obviously some financial contributions that you need to do in order to set that up, but is it that you have to have all your ducks in a row? You have to have your retirement account already figured out? Like, what does that look like for the average Joe that might not even know they needed a trust?
Yeah, if they qualify for a trust, then you would just find an attorney in your state that practices estate planning, and you would fill out that long, lengthy form. I know that you had to fill out that kind of goes through every single asset that you have and some of the things you haven't really thought about. And then, your attorney can kind of craft something that works for you. I mean, a trust isn't for everybody. It is more expensive on the front end to set up a trust, but it's cheaper in the long term. Because, a will is usually a couple $100s, whereas a trust might be a couple thousand, depending on how complex it is. But as we just talked about with the will, it's, a couple $100, but in the long term, you're paying lawyers and probate fees and court fees that comes along with it. And if anybody contests the will for any given reason, that court hearing can go on for years. So it really just depends on how you want to set it up, either in the front end, on the back end.
So with you just saying that brings me back to one of my real estate transactions. And do y'all mind if I get a little bit transparent of why it's like, God kept sending me transactions that where people were dealing with probate courts and estate situations and stuff like that. So he had a will from his deceased wife and everything like that. And he presented the will, but during that time, he signed away his right of survivorship. And I kind of want to dive a little bit. I know. And then when I saw that, I was just like, had you not signed that part of the estate would have went to you automatically with the right of survivorship on the deed. And once upon a time, he had it on there. And it was like a year or two before, got rid of it. It was just like, why did you do that?
Yeah, was there a reason why? It was just okay, we'll get into that later. Okay.
Got speculations of why, and I said, man, well, I felt like they did it pretty good if my speculations are true. They set up themselves for success, and it kind of goes into that whole blended family situation and stuff too. Just make sure that you do it. So part of that, when you're talking about spending money, a few $100s like on a will and thousands of dollars on a trust, but the probate court itself, just to get the lawyer started, it's $5,000. So to me, it's either you're going to pay now or you're going to pay later. And if you pay later without having a will or trust, you're going to be paying a lot more. And then going back to what you first started, the government's going to be putting their hands in it of how it's going to be dictated and go. And with that, it's just the whole family just fell apart, fighting, arguing.
And it's a hard time too for families. So,
Absolutely.
Part of that is alleviating that pain from your family in the event. I mean, I keep saying in the event, but I mean, it's going to happen. So anytime that you can have that on paper, even when we talk about the power of attorneys, and I know we're probably going to get there, having your wishes and everything lined out makes it easier for, your loved ones to have to deal with.
Yeah, let me ask you this now. I know that I have some single people out there that might own a home and stuff like that, and they don't have any descendants and stuff. Like, what does a trust look like for them if they don't have, or if someone doesn't have any descendants and stuff like that?
So you don't have to have descendants. You can have, I have nieces, I don't have children of my own, but I have nieces, so you might have aunts or uncles, you might have grandparents, you might have a 501c3 organization, your sorority scholarship fund. A lot of times when we get these scholarship funds, it's sometimes from somebody's estate. You might have a church that you want to donate to. So none of that is going to happen if you don't put that into any type of document. Now, if you're single and you die without a will, depending on the state, again, it's very state specific, but in Arizona and in Georgia, if you're single, you're not married, you don't have any kids, then generally it steps up to your parents. And they would stand to inherit things 50-50. Then from there, if your parents are no longer living, it will come down to your siblings. And then sometimes it steps back up to the aunts and uncles and then down to cousins until they can find somebody. It's very rare that, back in the old time movies where you saw somebody like, I have a great, 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 great aunt that just left me $10 million. The way that would actually happen is if they don't have any family. So it's possible, it hasn't happened to me, but it's
right. I was gonna say, maybe I got one out there.
Yeah, but usually they died without a will, and then they keep looking for some type of descendant so that the government doesn't have to hold on to the asset.
Got it. So when we're talking about everything as far as the will and trust goes, I know we talked about probate court, but do you mind kind of explaining what does that mean? Because people not necessarily use it kind of loosely. We hear it, but like, what does that really look like? And I know different states have different time periods and stuff like that.
Yeah, so probate is just the process of determining where those assets are going to go. In a probate court, not only are you dealing with somebody's estate plan, but they're also dealing with conservators, guardianships. So anytime, for instance, if somebody doesn't have that healthcare power of attorney and they aren't able to speak on their own behalf, they're incapacitated for some reason, the family would have to generally go to the court and petition for a conservator or a guardian to be able to take care of their finances and make healthcare decisions. So the probate court actually handles all of that. So going through the probate process really just varies from state to state. So sometimes you file a petition and then there's a waiting period for any descendants or heirs to answer. You have to put information out there to creditors to let them know that somebody has died, because those student loans don't die with you, and neither do a lot of your other.
Wait a minute. Well, let's pause right there. Wait a minute. Student loan debt doesn't go away when you die.
Yeah, you need to. Yeah, that's not a lawyer thing. You need to talk to a tax attorney or somebody about that, because no, those federal student loans, they do not die with you. Fun fact.
Well, I got a friend that's waiting on. I'm never paying them back. I just gonna go to the grave with me.
I think after 20 years, depending on the type of loan that you have, sometimes I think if you've been paying the minimum or something, they kind of dissipate. But no, they don't go away. Mm-mm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they get you. They'll bill your estate.
Okay. So let's say like in a trust situation, how do you do like power of attorney or somebody? I know you mentioned to me being over like if something happened to me and I couldn't make a sound decision, someone would have that decision-making power. What is that about? If you could dive into that or re-explain it better than I.
Yeah,
pieces together.
So particularly for business owners, when we talk about the durable power of attorney, that is, let's say that, I don't like using ourselves as example, but let's say that John is hit by a truck, right? And he's in a coma, can't talk for himself, can't act for himself. If he has a durable power of attorney, obviously before he's hit by the truck, right? That person can make any type of business decisions for him. So when we talk about our businesses, a lot of us are either sole proprietors or, we're the managing partners. And so the business has to continue. And so if that paperwork isn't in place, who's paying your bills? Who's making sure your house doesn't go in foreclosure? You can't just walk up to the bank and say, John is in the hospital. You have to have a piece of paper that allows you to act on your own behalf. And you want to make sure that that person is business savvy. Right? Because just because, it's a random nephew or somebody that you trust, you don't necessarily want him in your bank account, and making sure that your clients are still contacted, or making sure that your business partners are aware and signing contracts on your behalf. So that's what the durable power of attorney does. That's just the document that you set up. You can determine what rights they have, what rights they don't have. With your healthcare power of attorney, with your living will, that is determining what happens to your health. So who can make the medical decisions for you? Who can, we make sure that you sign a HIPAA in advance for certain people, because everybody can't just go in and request medical information about you, even if it's your parent. So especially if you're single, if you don't want to trust, you're like, hey, I don't want to deal with that right now, definitely get a healthcare power of attorney and a living will, which is the healthcare directive, to either let your loved one know, what your wishes are, or what, you want the doctors to do. I mean, the healthcare power of attorney goes so in depth. It talks about, whether or not you want to be kept alive on a ventilator. For us as women, it talks about if you're pregnant, if you're less than 6 months pregnant, do you want to be kept alive on a ventilator? If you're more than 6 months pregnant, do you want to be kept alive, even if, there's no chance of you coming back? That's something people don't think about. If you're of childbearing age, you're 6 months pregnant, they pulled the plug, your child won't make it. But hey, do you want us to keep you alive past viability just for purposes of giving birth? So it goes that in depth. And I know we don't like to think about it. I know it feels morbid, but it's better than somebody that's grieving having to make a decision for you that really is an emotional decision. It's better that they know your wishes up front, and you can get it in any state that you're in. So I don't care what state you're in, just Google healthcare, living will, or healthcare power of attorney, or you can fill it out. You can usually file it in your state, or you can give it to your primary care physician, or you can let your loved one know where it's located in the event that something happens.
So part of that I think is so critical of what you were saying, and I don't know if you even realized you were saying, you kept saying the word in advance, in advance, in advance.
Yeah.
So who are the people who cannot set up a will or trust? Like, let's say if they didn't do it in advance. I know there's certain criteria you have to meet in order to set these things up. Do you mind speaking on that?
Yeah, so in most states, you have to be at least 18 years old. You have to be of sound mind, meaning no mental disability. Now, it doesn't mean that, you can't have a mental disability. It just means that you have to know actively what you're doing and what you're signing away and the rights that you're giving away, especially when we're talking about those durable power of attorneys. I mean, you're giving people rights to your bank accounts and to your business. So we want to make sure that they're in the sound mind. They can't have dementia. They can't have, a lot of illnesses that means that they don't really know what exactly that they're executing. So if you can actually legally execute a contract, it's kind of like buying a house. You have to be of a certain mindset to be able to come to closing and write your name. So the same type of requirements. So you have to still be of sound mind. What that means is that by the time grandma or grandpa gets dementia, it's too late. You can't.
That part.
Yeah, there's no more, everybody's scrambling, and I get it, but it's too late. Now you have to go to the court and get a conservatorship and a guardianship. It's done. So, anytime before something happens, before you are of diminished capacity, you need to execute those documents. Once you're no longer of, sound mind, then we would have to look at other options.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key word in estate planning is planning for the future. You got to start planning. Don't wait till life happens and then be like, oh crap, what do I do now? I know when I was a little bit younger and stuff like that, I was like, oh, I was traveling the world during this time. And I was like, if something happens to me and I die, I'll get a life insurance policy so my family can have something. But here's something I didn't think about as a young person, because we kind of don't talk about this either, was long-term disability and stuff. And then when I got sick abroad and had to come back home and couldn't work, was like, man, you got life insurance and stuff if you die, but you didn't think about anything when you were living. So now it's like, let me take care of myself in the living. So when I'm dead and gone, all of that will happen. And then when it came to, choosing between a will or a trust for myself, it was more of a will is more like a wish is how I like to see it. Yeah. But a trust is a testament to where you gonna do what I said. So I'm bossy. Y'all already know, disclaimer out there. Y'all know I'm bossy and stuff like that. So if I can speak from the grave and say, you have to follow this document and do what I say, hey, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. So real quick, I just want to give this plug for those who might be chiming in or came in a little bit later after we started. We are going to do Q&A, and we are going to open up the floor for people to ask questions. If you have any questions, leave it in the chat. either on Facebook, YouTube, or if you're on Zoom, go ahead and leave it. We'll call on you. If you are called on to ask a question, just start with "my question is," and if Lauren needs more information, she will ask you for more information. If it's something that takes a little bit more peeling apart the onion in a sense of a way, Lauren will definitely leave in her contact information so you can call her directly, do a consultation, and that way you can really dive into it. Sounds like a plan? Hopefully this is some good information. Let us know in the chat. Give us some hearts, give us some likes, everything like that. So let me go back to my next question.
All right.
What happens, talking about kind of planning this in advance, what happens if you're in the process of setting up a trust or will and life happens during that process? Does it automatically like stay in place because, hey, at least you started? Or how does that work if you die when you're planning?
Yeah, unfortunately not. So in order, at least in Arizona and Georgia, but I would think in most states, but definitely double check, in order for a will or a trust to be valid, it has to have certain requirements done. It has to be signed by the testator, the person doing the will or the trust, and it has to be witnessed. So generally you would have it either notarized and then also have a couple of witnesses that are present at the will signing, sign their name on that line as well. The reason we have witnesses is so that if anybody comes back and contests the will or the trust, we can have those witnesses come up to court and testify. They were there, you were in sound mind, you didn't have, any type of ailment that will prevent you from executing that type of agreement. So you would be signed by a witness. And then we also have what's called a self-proving affidavit on the back. So there's a lot of signatures we're passing along, a lot of pins, and everything's going in a full circle. So if it's not properly executed, then it's almost like you died without a will. Same thing with the trust. The trust has to be funded. So some people think, hey, I went on LegalZoom or whatever and I set up my trust.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do not fund a revocable trust with $10, with a house, with something, it's almost like you never set it up at all. It's empty.
Wow.
And because it's revocable during your lifetime, it automatically becomes irrevocable when you die, generally. It's done. So if there's nothing in there, there's nothing in there.
So what is the difference between a revocable and irrevocable trust? Because I hear those two terms out there in the world, and I'm not 100% sure what it really means, the difference, but do you mind expounding on it?
Of course. So generally a revocable trust means just what it sounds like. You can take it back at any time while you're still living. When the revocable trust is set up, what we generally do is you, Janelle, are the first trustee and you are the beneficiary. So what that does is during your lifetime, you can use your house, you can use your car, whatever's in the trust, you are the sole beneficiary. And it does not become, and that also means you can take things in and out of the trust. You could shut down the trust. You could say, hey, I no longer want this, or I'm married, or, I don't need this anymore. I want to reestablish it. I want to take my house out the trust. I want to go sell my home, etc. You can do that for as long as you're living. Perfect. Now, once you die, it's now irrevocable, meaning whatever's in the trust is in the trust. And those secondary beneficiaries and that secondary trustee that you've named, let's say it's your dad, is the secondary trustee. He's now in charge of who's getting what. Okay. So with the irrevocable trust, generally that is for a certain level of wealth. Because you are putting assets aside that you can no longer have control over for the most part. You can use them a little bit, but it's usually more for tax planning, because usually when trusts are taxed a little differently, there is what's called an estate tax that happens after you die. But right now, I think it's at the $11 million mark based off of somebody's net worth. So usually people put assets in irrevocable trusts to kind of get around some of that trust liability. Same way that, people use the gift tax. So, each year you can gift up to like $12,000 to somebody tax-free without it being a tax on you or on them. So usually that's part of the tax planning for people that are in a different bracket.
Got it. So with that, me. I'm gonna go back to me.
Mhm.
So setting up a revocable trust means that, hey, I don't have any kids or a husband right now, but if life changes and I acquire more assets, like rental properties, or I, give birth to a child or adopt a child or whatever the case may be, it's something that I can change in the future.
Yeah, you can always change your revocable trust. You just, in the same thing, just like you can update your will. And that's also important for people to know. You need to keep updating your will and estate documents because things change, especially, you might be, well, I don't want to wish divorce on anybody, but you might be married today and next thing you're on living your best life in Jamaica and your ex-husband's still the beneficiary of everything, so all those things you update. Any type of life changes, you look at those documents, and you don't always need to go back to your lawyer for that because you have a good lawyer that empowers you to have all the tools that you need to know in order how to kind of navigate that process. So when you leave me, my hope is that you'll know, like, oh, I need to update my beneficiaries. I know how to do that. I know how to keep track of everything that's in my trust. If I have questions, I'm here. But you don't necessarily have to retitle everything. Now, if you have a child or, you get married, we definitely want to sit down and talk because we need to make some real amendments. If you want them included, hey, I don't know.
The kids, husband, well, we'll see how life goes. Make sure it kind of works out.
Right, you're on your own. So definitely making sure that any life events that happen, you want to keep that updated.
Okay. And then what are some items that you can put in a trust? Like I know, for instance, I could put my house in there. I don't know about my current life insurance or not. Or do I have to do a new one now? Or
no, so your life insurance, you're just changing the beneficiary. It's literally your beneficiary becomes the trust. So
I just like I said, benefit the trust.
Yeah. So what happens is it's like just like, hey, I want my life insurance. Now nothing happens. That's why it's a revocable trust. Nothing's going to happen and be complete until you die. Right. So that life insurance isn't going to pour over into that trust. It's just titled in there. And once you die, then that's when, the beneficiary will go to the trust. Same thing with your house. Anything that you can title, you can put in your trust. You also, generally what we do is we put a list together of items that are in the trust. So you can't technically title your beautiful couch, but you could put it on your list and say, hey, like my couch belongs to my trust. But that's also why we have that, what's called a pour over will for those smaller items that you can't really title and things that you acquire because you don't want to sit down and retitle everything. That pour over will, usually you're able to go to probate court through what's called a small estate affidavit in Arizona. And that way you don't have to go through the full probate process because the net worth of those assets that are still there is so small because the house, the car, the big jewelry items are already in the trust. It would just go through a small probate process.
So now with the trust, doesn't it give you like a EIN number to where like if you wanted to buy assets later, like a house or something like that, you can use that instead of your social security number or some stuff like that?
Usually you do that more with like a irrevocable trust. The reason for that, because it's a tax situation. Now, after you pass away and we're dealing with a trust estate and the trust is still being administered, there are tax consequences and stuff that the trustee will have to deal with if it stays for a long period of time and if it's up to a certain amount of money. But generally you deal with the EINs and everything with the irrevocable trust because it's a separate entity. It's like a business. And because you're getting away with some tax issues, again, that's a tax lawyer question, which I'm not going to touch.
No problem.
Yeah, because you're dealing with some of those ramifications, that's usually geared for those larger estates.
No, I appreciate all the information. And like I said, I am new to this and I am learning. I've actually started diving more into this because there's been so many situations that have come up, like the real estate transactions and stuff, that it's like, man, if you educate yourself about this, you would feel, for one, more knowledgeable when speaking about it. And two, hey, get your affairs in order before you leave this earth. Like, take what you're seeing as see Jack run with the big red ball, is how like my dad likes to say, and get your stuff together. life is going to happen and you don't want your family falling apart. You don't want your friends falling apart over choosing what side of the family member to be on and stuff, because you just didn't do the work. Especially if you're, hit me for this, if you're older and stuff like that, and you have like an illness and stuff. Like I've seen people that have illnesses before won't even put a trust or will in place, knowing that, kind of like how you said, was it Chadwick Boseman that was had cancer? I think it was prostate cancer. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong. And through that time, didn't put a will or trust together with millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And then the crazy part about it, the people that really benefit from it are the government. Well, the government, and then of course all the attorneys that you get all these fees and stuff now because you didn't do it. So it's like,
right.
I'm just not keen on making everybody else rich and not myself rich, and paying me first and my family first for everything I worked hard for. So
absolutely.
So with that being said, are you open to answering some questions, Q&A style?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, let me bring up my chat. Real quick, I'm gonna do, okay. Let's see, great information, everything. So the question is, explain completing a trust with an LLC. If doing so, is that trust with the business assets only can be included in your personal assets as well? Let's say if I don't want my assets in my name, but in my business name, house, car, etc.
So if I'm hearing her question correctly, Tiffany, do you mean if your company owns assets? So, I mean, I can speak from a place. So I do work with a lot of entrepreneurs. A lot of times with your business, if I'm understanding the question correctly, and feel free, Tiffany, to update in the chat if I'm a little off base with your question. But when you have a business, that belongs to the business and not to you personally. But that's why part of your contracts that you put in place, your operation agreement, what happens to your company in the event that you are no longer living, and what happens to those assets are so important. So that is a separate plan that you have for your company, either the winding down process, if your company is going to be shutting down, whether or not you're going to sell off those assets, or whether or not you want the company to live on after you. That is some planning that we do on the business side. So for instance, you should own intellectual property, your trademark, you might have a car in your business's name, but all of that goes into your operating agreement or your partnership agreement to make sure that if one of the partners dies, that your heirs don't lose track of that property. So you need to determine whether or not your son or daughter is able to step up in your place and become the partner to that same company, or if the partners have to buy you out. That's a company question, but that is something that's so important for entrepreneurs to understand when we're talking about that generational wealth and how to make sure that your children are benefiting from your company and all the sweat equity that you put in over the years, making sure that they get to inherit it and that it doesn't just go back to the state or go back to your other business partner, or it's just sold off in some type of wind down provision. But that's in your operating agreements, that's in your contracts, your partnership agreements, and whatever paperwork that you have going on with your company.
Great info. That was a lot. I feel like I need to sit down just on the business side and get all my affairs in order too.
Yeah.
Because I want to expand my team and stuff like that. But I mean, sometimes you don't know, but you don't know until life happens. So,
absolutely.
Tiffany, thank you so much for that question. Does anybody else have any questions out there? Let me just double check. And I'm sorry, I am going through 3 different platforms just to make sure. And then if not, then I don't mind asking you a follow-up, or I know we're getting closer to 8 o'clock, even if there is nothing else, then what we can do is that you can leave us with some words of wisdom, or your key advice you would like for us to take away from this podcast. Like I said, I know what I've taken away just from our conversations offline. And again, that's why I was like, I got to get Lauren on so she can tell the world about it. Because she can
Yeah.
explain it way better than me, to where it's like, it kind of sounds gibberish when it comes out of my mouth, but it's just like, just trust me, just do it, just do it, just do it. So it doesn't look like we have any other questions out there. But before we even do
There's
that, you
one
close
question in the
us.
chat. I
Oh, just
see
kidding.
Alan. I have kids. Is
Sure.
it recommended to start on a will first or a trust for them? It really depends on your circumstances. So, a trust isn't for everybody. I know that, depending on your circumstances, you may want a trust depending on the amount of assets that you have. Trusts are for people that want more anonymity. They don't want people kind of knowing what their assets are, going through the court system. But if you have kids, just talk to an estate planning attorney. They can usually guide you as far as what will be best for your circumstances. But depending on your unique set of situations, they will put together both for you. So you really don't necessarily start with a will and then move over to a trust. Generally, it's one kind of estate plan that's put together for you and based on your unique needs.
That's a great question. I didn't even think about asking that. So yeah, I'm sitting here thinking like there's just so many. So that's the critical thing about this, guys, is that sitting down and realizing your situation versus another situation. And I think that's what causes a lot of confusion out there in the marketplace or in the world and stuff like that, is because one scenario is not necessarily the same for somebody else and vice versa. So with that being said, Lauren, do you want to tell everybody like, hey, if they want to do estate planning and, took so much value from this conversation that we had, how can they reach you? How can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are in Arizona or in Georgia, I'll be happy to sit down and talk to you about your estate plan. My website is www.mcalpinfirm.com. It's McAlpinFirm.com. I'm on Instagram at Legally Lauren ESQ, and also on Facebook, McAlpin Firm. So feel free to reach out if you have some questions that you didn't want to ask in front of others. You can message me. All of my information is on my website, as well as booking information. You can book a consult with me through my website, and my calendar and everything is up. So just let me know.
Okay, perfect. By chance, can you drop a link in the
Yeah.
chat first? And that way we make sure that we have it. So with that being said, guys, I cannot stress this enough of how much I have seen this do some pretty bad situations on families and friends through not having an estate planning or estate plan just set up. So if I can encourage anybody out there, no matter how much it costs, the cost of it is pennies on the dollars compared to the cost of not having a trust or will. And again, I lean forward more on the trust than the will, but again, depending on your circumstances, depending on what you got going on, one might be more favorable to you than the others. So I do appreciate everybody coming out tonight, especially I know it's almost 8 o'clock and I know some of us got to get up and go to work in the morning. But before we dip out and everything like that, Lauren, do you want to just close us out with like, if you have a top advice or a word of wisdom you want to leave with us, what would that be?
I guess my best advice is just protect your assets, because I'm a firm believer that I am literally living my ancestors' wildest dreams. And I know that I wouldn't be where I was if I didn't have, parents that blessed me enough to even provide for college or for law school. And so I'm supposed to be speaking at a women's conference in Phoenix on Saturday. And so I've been kind of listening to TED Talks and everything. But the kind of topic that keeps coming up is the fact that most of these millionaires, they're built on the backs of blue collar workers, right? Oprah her parents weren't millionaires. Steve Jobs' parents wasn't a millionaire. Walt Disney's parents weren't millionaires. And so while we're all kind of working to build our generational wealth and become our family's first millionaire, like your goal should be to make sure that you aren't your family's last millionaire. So if you make it there, pass it on. I get it. It's a morbid conversation, but I believe that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. And I think if we could pass it on to the next generation, we're going to be great.
Look, I love that. Make sure you're not just a first family millionaire, but make sure you're not the last one. Like,
Mhm.
I'm gonna write credit to you, but I am definitely gonna be taking next. Right
Absolutely.
there.
I think I found it somewhere else too. So I gotta find the credit. It
Okay.
said unknown, but yes.
That hit like, ooh, all right,
Yeah.
that hit my soul on that one. So Lauren, I just want to thank you for coming out and sharing this information. Again, you guys, her information is in the chat. So if you want to reach out to her, book a call so you can figure out what your circumstances are and what that looks like for you, go ahead and do that. On that note, we can't close it out any better than that. So you guys have a good night. And once again, thanks for coming out.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me, Janelle. This is amazing.
You're welcome. And I'm glad. And I'm glad technology worked.
Yay!
Praise be to God. He still loves me. Because Jesus knows I was trying like at least 3 or 4 times today, all my snapshots trying to just get it going. So good. So I am going to go ahead and end this stream on that